Howdy! It's finally time I can talk about my hero, Sonic the Hedgehog. This character has meant so much to me since I was just 6 years old, so this list is very close to my heart. While Sonic does have his quality, thrilling, high-speed modern games, he's also had some crazily appalling missteps. Quite a few, unfortunately. I think the classic Sonic games have already been covered quite extensively. So let's check out the 5 best and worst modern Sonic games. And for this video, I'd like to invite my favorite Sonic YouTuber and a friend of mine.
Part-time Sonic Tuber. Oh, sorry. Hello there, I'm Nick.
Hey Game Apologist. It's a pleasure to finally have you on the show, Nick. As a fellow Sonic fan, would you like to talk with me a bit about modern Sonic?
I was under the impression you wanted to talk about your favorite rubber chicken varieties with me. Mine is Archie McPhee's Green Glow in the Dark one, obviously. But fine, if we must talk about the Blueberry Beast, I'm happy to help.
Okay, great. To start with, you'd probably know this better than me. When would you consider a modern Sonic game?
So modern is a very loaded word for the Sonic fanbase, as it wasn't even one that was used until Sonic Generations. And even then, modern can vary between Sonic character designs or game design. And even then, it can vary from title to title. With all that acknowledged, I personally consider Sonic Unleashed to be the first modern Sonic game. This is the first major title from Sonic Team after a massive shift in leadership and focus for the series. And it's the first mainline game to incorporate the boost mechanics found from the Rush games on the DS. It's still a very transitionary title, but arguably it's the clearest line in the sand if you wanted to break these games down by eras.
I think that's a smart definition. Let's call modern Sonic anything from Sonic Unleashed onwards then. And with that said, on to the countdown. For the 5th worst, Sonic and the Black Knight. My brother and I have our own personal contest for this game. We like to see who can get furthest into the game before they drop the controller and attempt to shatter the disc in rage with a large hammer. So far, the winner is Raz at level 3. When the Wii was released, many feared the console would simply be used by developers to release low-budget, low-effort games that only use the Wii's gimmicks for the novelty of it. And unfortunately, Sonic and the Black Knight didn't feel too far off these fears. Well, Nick, you're the Master Sonic speed reader here. Why don't you tell us a story?
Alright. Are you familiar with King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table? Well, throw all of that out because this game's story is nothing like that one. In Sonic and the Black Knight, we meet a wizard named Merlina. She's surrounded by, King Arthur? Okay. And his army. So she summons a hero to rescue her, which is, of course, a blue cartoon animal who wears nothing but sneakers and double-fist chili dogs. But hey, it does the job. Later, Sonic learns that King Arthur has become corrupt due to the power of his scabbard that grants him immortality. Sonic then takes up the blade Caliburn. And if Sonic with a sword didn't look silly enough, this one also talks.
You are the chosen one. You are but a squire.
He then meets his friends, taking their Ren Fair personas way too seriously, and the Lady of the Lake, who tasks him with collecting the knight's swords to dispel Arthur's immortality. I assume with stabbing? Who knew that you could deal with immortality the same way you could deal with good old-fashioned mortality?
Sonic then challenges King Arthur and successfully defeats him. But then Merlina takes a scabbard for herself so she can attain the power of immortality.
Yeah, so she has something of an existential crisis. But Sonic manages to talk some sense into her after dressing up like Lil Nas X and smacking her in the face a few times with a giant blade.
This story, as a whole, is actually pretty solid. There's a strong message here of valuing the time we have alive, and that's right up my alley. Overall, as outlandish as the story is, the writing's actually handled pretty well.
This story is actually a fan favorite, and I can see why. There's certainly a lot of surreal creativity. I personally find it fine, also weirdly arrogant. They end the game declaring Sonic to actually be King Arthur, and after the credits, a book closes, and we're set the title, King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, suddenly transforms to Sonic and the Black Knight, because I guess he just told the story better? Whatever, it's weird, it's fun. It's not my actual gripe with this game. Mine boils down to, surprise, unpolished gameplay and sloppy Wii waggle controls. Why were they so determined to make that stupid thing work?
Why indeed. I think if the game had allowed players to use both the classic controller or the GameCube controller, this would have been a much smaller issue. Or if they delayed the game till the Wii Motion Plus came out, I think the swordplay could have been much better.
Sonic can still do a homing attack, but it doesn't do much except fling Sonic forward and bop him into enemies. Despite being called an attack, the amount of damage it does is pretty pitiful. This doesn't feel like the unstoppable blue blur I know.
Me neither. I guess it was their way of highlighting the new sword mechanics. With his primary attack, we swing the Wii Remote to have Sonic swing his sword. For every single swipe, you have to make the sword swing.
As much as I make fun of it, I don't actually hate the idea of Sonic with the sword, and I do love a lot of games in the Wii library, but the remote's waggle controls aren't the most responsive. It's a step up from Secret Rings, but not enough to justify this control scheme. And when Sonic's running along at fast speeds, timing's a critical factor. You need that response time.
Yeah, the high-speed on-rail mechanics don't give you much room for error. Plus, I've never much cared for the lack of freedom on-rail gives us. I just don't think it's a good gimmick. This one's early on the list though, as I really like the art style, and the story's a strong effort. I understand some people really like this game, and I don't think it's outright terrible, but I personally couldn't get more than a couple of levels through with the clunky waggle controls.
To be honest, and not to throw Josh under the bus, or Armored Horse, I don't know if this title would show up on my own personal top 5 worst list. It's been a while since I played it properly, but even revisiting this one just reminded me of those initial negative impressions. Still, I am excited to dig deeper with this one because there is a lot to appreciate, such as the art direction. The graphics look solid and I adore these character designs.
True, even if the gameplay wasn't particularly stellar, the graphics are really aesthetically pleasing. I really like the soundtrack too.
Oh yeah, June and Crush 40 did some solid songs for this title. The main theme is really catchy too.
I actually think the voice acting's some of the strongest in the series too. When I compare this to the hammy, sugar job performances in Sonic Heroes, I actually found myself more drawn into the story. All in all, while the gameplay leaves much to be desired, Sonic and the Black Knight does have a nice story and a great presentation, particularly for a Wii game, so it's not as bad as some of the other travesties on this list. And for the 5th best, Sonic Unleashed. Let's start with one of the obvious choices, because the daytime stages here are some of the most fun I've had in a Sonic game. Not just in modern Sonic games, but some of the most fun I've had in the entire Sonic franchise. I mean, just look at the sense of speed to this thing.
Go! Go!
Up to that point, I can't think of any other 3D Sonic game that had captured Sonic's speed so intimately. The way the music and sound twists as Sonic breaks through the speed of sound, crashing through the terrain. It's hard to express what a thrill I felt when I first played Sonic running in this game.
It's clear our blue buddy is thoroughly enjoying it too. Sonic cheers in excitement as he boosts through at supersonic speeds, crashing through the sound barrier. Wait, how does that work? Can you actually hear him whoop while he's running that fast? Does that technically... You know what, I'm overthinking it. I'm sorry, don't worry about it.
This alone felt like such a revolutionary step for the franchise to me, because it's not trying to capture the original 2D Sonic experience. This is truly its own 3D fast Sonic experience. You'll spend about 5 to 10 minutes zipping through these beautiful, lush, interactive day stages, which is great. But then, unfortunately, as dusk arrives, you'll spend about 20 to 30 minutes bashing your head against the wall as you try to navigate your way through the notorious Werehog Night stages. I believe some people dislike the Werehog stages because they're much slower than the day stages, and the gameplay mechanic is completely foreign to Sonic. However, I'd like to try and bring something new to the table and talk about some of the positives of the night stages. While not as fast, I personally felt some of the beat-up action could get pretty manic. There's a nice variety of enemies to dispose of, and I appreciate the greater emphasis on platforming. There's a surprising amount of combos you can use as a Werehog, and you unlock more as you upgrade his abilities throughout the game.
I'm sorry, Josh, I hate the Werehog. It's not as horrible as critics made it out to be back in the day, far from it, but wow, this dragged the gameplay down to a frustrating crawl. It does improve as you level up, and for younger kids who probably can't get into the gory goodness of Kratos, this is competent. There's a lot here I would love to see refined, but they really should have made a stronger impression with this form like they did with the Boost. And if you were old enough for God of War, that already had plenty of sequels and clones that you could play instead of this.
Probably my biggest issue with this game is Chip.
What is my name? I don't know. I can't remember.
Holy bejeebers, I hate this guy. The vast majority of his conversation is just annoying quips about food. And I'm sure the voice actor was trying his best, but holy cow is he grating in this role. But nitpicks aside, the daytime gameplay was exhilarating and revolutionary for modern Sonic. I personally don't think the Werehog sections were quite enough to ruin that great experience. Chip came close though, I really dislike that guy.
While we disagree a little bit on the Werehog, I have to admit that Chip also rubbed me the wrong way. I know a lot of people feel the game after this one is where Sonic truly became too kiddie for its own good, but Chip was clearly starting us down that path. That said, like the Werehog, he too improves as the game carries on. But regardless of my own thoughts on the Werehog or Chip, none of this is enough to ruin the fun of this game. There's a lot going on in Unleashed that deserves a bit of digging and checking out for yourself.
And for the fourth worst, Sonic the Hedgehog 4 Episode 1. Sonic 4 Episode 1 was an attempt to bring the older fans back to the Sonic franchise. A surprisingly lackluster attempt that made Sega appear to have no idea what they're doing, and showed they'd have to wait for a fan to take over to actually recapture the 2D Sonic experience properly. You know, Sonic Mania, more on that later. But they managed a good Sonic 2D platformer with Sonic Rush and Sonic Advance, so why'd they mess up so bad here?
There were a lot of red flags just in the teasers leading up to this game's release. Removing all other playable characters, making it episodic, yeah, we had some concerns. But considering all those games that Josh just mentioned, and who was developing the title, surely this would be a good game, right?
No.
I like how even on the title screen, Sonic has this strangely somber, lifeless expression as he waggles his finger. Like even he knows he's about to gravely disappoint fans around the world. Sonic 4 Episode 1 was developed by Dimps rather than Sonic Team, and I personally think Dimps did a great job with titles like Sonic Advance and Sonic Rush. I even enjoyed Sonic Rush enough to boot up my old 3DS to replay it recently. So how could anyone on the team actually think Sonic 4's stiff gameplay was up to snuff with Sonic Rush? Yet alone the original Sonic Genesis games is apparently a sequel to. Maybe it has something to do with its release being delayed, but maybe this is the best they could get out of it.
Out of all of the problems with this game, and don't you worry, we will talk about them, almost all of it could be forgivable as long as they honored those classic Sonic physics. And hey, this is a sequel after all. Maybe they've somehow managed to evolve that old school gameplay by removing the momentum. Oh god.
The gravity and momentum are just so inconsistent here. For example, if you're running and you let go of the D-pad, Sonic just jarringly stops really quickly. There's even instances where you can't spin dash up a steep hill, but you can walk up it.
So, okay, running and slowing down, and I made it. What the crap?
In the Sonic Genesis games, it feels like Sonic has a weight to his movement. But here, you'll hit a speed boost and run for half a second, then awkwardly fall back into a jog. Even something as simple as Sonic's spinning animation felt strangely lazy, plastic, and superficial to me.
Clearly, the 4 slapped onto this title is not here to respect the legacy of the series, but to lure in older Sonic fans like us who were starved for quality Sonic content at that point. As we would later find out, this game started its life as a touchscreen-focused mobile game, and it shows. Recycling classic Sonic aesthetics and somehow making them feel generic, and music that tried to replicate the feel of the Genesis games. The melodies are fine enough, but the chiptune noise isn't very pleasant. I'd go so far as to say it makes me regret the invention of ears.
I gotta admit, I have a soft spot for chiptunes, but I did find them grating on me a lot quicker than, say, Sonic 1 or Sonic Advance's soundtrack. And the thing is, we know the classic Sonic 2D formula has been done well since the original Genesis games. As I said, Sonic Advance and Sonic Rush managed to update the platforming of the originals really well, with all of that post-adventure modern style. For example, check out the graphics and sound on Sonic Rush here. For me, this feels like a proper reiteration of 2D Sonic. Sonic has that same sense of weight, that same sense of momentum as he hurtles through the stages. I even love the little victory dance Sonic does at the end of the stage. Anyway, Sonic 4 Episode 1 ended up just too underwhelming for fans to talk about later after its release. Episode 2, on the other hand, was considered by many a big step up. Immediately, you can probably tell that the physics and Sonic's sense of weight is much better here. It's not quite at the polish of Sonic Rush for me, but it's a definite improvement that should be acknowledged. And for the fourth best, Sonic Lost World. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about this one, probably because it was released for the ill-fated Wii U, but fortunately, it's since seen a re-release on Steam.
Really? You like this game better than Black Knight? Actually, you know what? I think I do too. Maybe. I don't know. Lost World is a weird game that I don't know how to feel about one way or the other, but there's a lot of fun stuff going on in this title. Not so much in its story. Sonic and Tails chase Eggman to this floating continent called Lost Hex. There, Eggy takes control of the Deadly Six, a group of Zeddy who can control machines. He keeps them in line with a cacophonic conch. That is until Sonic knocks it out of his hand, and the Zeddy turn Robotnik's robots against him. And the rest of the adventure sees Sonic and Eggman team up to take down the Six, until Eggman McMuffin turns on Sonic at the end for a boss fight. What's Lost Hex? What's a Zeddy? How do they control robots? What kind of creature lives in that conch? Who cares? Certainly not the writers. The Six are the most boilerplate villain designs I have seen in a long time. I mean, they follow all the rules. Their personalities and character designs are very easy to discern, but that's it. Zavok is basically Bowser, but without all the dragon turtle elements, which might sound like an odd thing to miss about a character, but it's those goofy elements that help define Bowser as a character, both in personality and design. These guys are baby's first villains. I literally cannot remember most of their names. There's Green Lady and the big yellow one, and since he's big, of course, he eats a lot and is stupid. And there's an old one. Okay, what is the dynamic here? How do they function as a unit? What is their purpose? What is their relation to their home? God, I'm so tired just talking about these guys.
Yeah, while the gameplay is still sound to me, the characters and story definitely left something to be desired. Tails, for example, is acting like an outright jerk to Sonic in this game. An infamous cutscene even shows Tails throwing a hissy fit over Sonic trusting Eggman.
And you don't trust me to do it!
What? No! I trust you, Tails. It's just that...
No, you don't. You trust Eggman more. Do you know how much that bites?
While I always appreciate Tails having a spine, this is particularly out of character nasty for him. Anyway, gameplay-wise, I feel Sonic Lost World really shines. It brings back elements of Sonic Adventure with a new mechanic, parkour. Sonic can run across walls as well as climb in order to reach alternative paths. Some people dislike the parkour system, but it's very rarely mandatory. It certainly feels like a fitting system to bring to Sonic's games, and I do generally appreciate Sega trying something different. The Wisps return from Sonic Colors here, and most of the time they work pretty well. Story-wise, I'm not exactly sure why they returned. More on them later.
A lot of people compare Lost World to Super Mario Galaxy, and it's easy to see why. A lot of the levels are spherical, and it has the same gravity elements. In fact, some of the level themes match that of a Mario game. Sure, you could point to Sonic Adventure 2 or even Sonic Extreme as references, but Sonic Team has never been shy about admitting that the Nintendo exclusive Sonic titles were made with Mario fans in mind. Outside of the Zeddy and Wisps, I'm actually fine with the aesthetic. I just wish they bothered to copy that famous Nintendo polish. Still, this game doesn't get anywhere near enough credit for all the fun ideas at play here.
Overall, Lost World is a surprisingly challenging game to get through, but its controls are absolute light years ahead of something like Sonic 06. Plus, I've definitely got a soft spot for some of the music from this one. I mean, who doesn't love this opening theme? It sounds great. Anyway, if you can put the Deadly Six aside, I think the Sonic Lost World gameplay is really solid. The mechanics work well, they're creative, and they're an example of modern Sonic getting things mostly right. If you're curious, it's available on both Steam and the Wii U.
Eggman, you bite!
And for the third worst, Sonic Chronicles: The Dark Brotherhood. Hang on, this is actually a thing?
Oh, good golly, is it ever a thing?
This is definitely an example of Sonic Team getting creative, and it backfiring on them. What inspired the stories of the Sonic Adventure games and the like? Well, apparently the storylines of RPGs. So I guess it's not exactly crazy for Sonic to have his own RPG spin-off, but it's still kinda weird. Plus, the prestigious developers BioWare were behind this project. They were the creators of the Mass Effect series and Knights of the Old Republic. Those games are really good. What could go wrong? Well, a lot. But anyway, what's a story, Nick?
Well, truth be told, the story surrounding the game is honestly the more interesting one, seeing as it takes a lot of inspiration from Ken Pender's Knuckles narrative during his time on the Archie series. It's a long, hectic mess, but the long and short of it, Chronicles was the closest the games got to featuring elements from the western side of Sonic's storytelling. But thanks to lawsuits and other legal drama, we will likely never get to see this story play out or any of these new characters expanded on. And you can take that as a blessing or a curse, because unfortunately, the actual narrative isn't anything spectacular. Things kick off with Sonic thwarting Eggman, as you do, and then takes a long hiatus afterwards, until he learns that Knuckles, along with the Chaos Emeralds, have been kidnapped by a group named the Marauders. With the assistance of some old friends and Gun, Sonic embarks on a mission to rescue Knuckles. You also meet Shade and... Look, it all ends with the cliffhanger that's never gonna be resolved. We will be here all day if we try to recap this point by point, and honestly, it's not worth the effort.
For a BioWare RPG, this story is surprisingly bare bones, with very little of substance actually happening. The story suffers from a noticeable lack of development from Sonic's characters and his world too. Nothing particularly deep or interesting is revealed about the Marauders and what they identify with. And the villain X has a distractingly low amount of screen time, which left me unable to identify with his motives or who he is as a character. It's certainly an underdeveloped story by BioWare's high standards, but when I tried this one out, I was mostly curious of how the RPG mechanics held up. Sadly, I was pretty disappointed with this too. The main thing you'll be using are the character's special attacks, which all require some sort of small interactive input from the player in order to execute. And you better hope you're good at these, because you'll be doing them a lot in this game. And they have an astounding number of inputs that get tiring very quickly. Most of the inputs require many taps and swipes on the touchscreen, while Mario RPGs simply use the time press of a button or an analog stick being pulled and released. It makes the entire gameplay experience exhausting.
The presentation of Brotherhood is also pretty infamous within the Sonic community. Even the music, which is one of the few consistently good things in the Sonic series, is pretty unbearable in this game, which is extra embarrassing when you realize that most of these melodies are from classic Sonic tracks. They're just now made out of horrible, lazy beeps. Not only does this fall apart with any new compositions, it has the audacity to go back and ruin stuff that was already solid. I've heard tell that these were just placeholder tracks and the development was rushed so they never got around to it, but if that's the case, why didn't they just use the old tracks?
Even if you can put aside the music, the sound design as well feels lazy and unimpressive. And to me anyway, the sound effects are a very important part of the Sonic experience. Like personally, I think the graphics of Sonic Rush look way better than this, and that came out 3 years earlier. For Sonic's first attempt at an RPG, I personally think this game lacks polish in many areas. I had high-ish hopes, but personally, Sonic and the Dark Brotherhood felt incredibly mediocre and half-baked to me. And for the third best, Sonic Colors. After the release of Sonic Unleashed, it was met with many positive but critical reviews that cited the Werehog's gameplay as a major issue for why they felt the game came up short. Sonic Colors intently examined these reviews and tried to craft a better game. It keeps the same gameplay as Daytime Unleashed, without any of that Werehog nonsense. Fantastic! Personally, that's just the improvement I wanted. The game is high-speed platforming from start to finish, much closer to what many fans are hoping for with Unleashed.
The story is as straightforward as it gets. Eggman has built an amusement park in space. And look, I know the dude literally broke apart the planet and released an ancient deity that covered the shattered pieces in Lovecraftian darkness, but the guy really knows how to put together an amusement park. I mean, he's done it a few times over at this point. Why can't we just set aside a few acres for this guy?
Well, clearly, give him an acre and he'll take a planet. Robotnik tries to make it look like his park is just to entertain guests. And honestly, who wouldn't trust this guy?
I know I say that every time, but this time really, nothing will stop me.
Anyway, his true motive is to capture and harness the color power of the Wisps. So it's up to Sonic to use these color powers to save the Wisps.
Sega has this lovely habit of overcorrecting with the series, as it had taken quite a beating leading up to Colors, and one of the critiques that Sonic Team seemed completely fixated on was Sonic's bloated cast of characters. So they solved that by making Sonic the only playable character, but also threw in a ton of other characters that give him temporary power-ups. What?
It's a shame we're given that all or nothing mentality so often with Sega. Like, we're either given a sickly sweet onslaught of characters from Sonic Heroes, or we're given a lonely desert of just Sonic and Robotnik in Sonic 4. I mean, Sonic and Knuckles managed to keep 3 to 4 characters and just adding Tails and Knuckles. Why not try 3 to 4 instead of 2 or 20? Anyway, it's clear they wanted to return to the classic Sonic 2-esque style of just having Sonic, Tails, and Robotnik be the main focus of the story, which is understandable. As I mentioned before, the gameplay is almost the same as the daytime stages of Sonic Unleashed, only now Sonic has access to all his abilities from the start of the game. In addition to his standard moveset, he can now also harness the power of the Wisps. Personally, I think the Wisps added an interesting gameplay element that made exploration more fun.
I've got plenty of my own thoughts about Colors gameplay, but we'd be here for about 90 minutes if we got into all that. Cough cough, shameless plug, cough. But something I haven't mentioned a whole lot on my own channel, and something I certainly appreciate, was the fact that this marked the return of Supersonic in regular gameplay.
Supersonic!
It does turn off the Wisps and pops in the occasional spring in spots you would be unable to traverse without them. And unless you're playing the DS version, it does unfortunately remove any narrative importance to the form. But hey, I'm glad to see this return as a fun reward.
It took this series long enough, but we finally got here. Playable Supersonic in modern games outside bosses has been wanted by Sonic fans for a very long time, including us when we first saw Supersonic go up against Perfect Chaos in Sonic Adventure 23 years ago. For a Wii game, the presentation of colors is absolutely gorgeous, and the soundtrack is catchy as well, and definitely among my favorites. In fact, on a personal note, I often have a playlist of these songs going while doing my long-distance runs in the mountains.
Despite some nitpicky gripes I have with Colors, the setting for this title is one of my favorites in any video game. I love amusement park and carnival themes, and Colors just amps it up beautifully. There's a lot to take in here. The different themes across each zone keep the game's environments feeling fresh, distinct, and varied. Even though Sonic zones are no stranger to carnivals, there's not a single level here that feels like it's retreading familiar territory. A problem, ironically enough, that would permeate the games going forward. But for Colors, this is bursting with creativity, and I love it.
Overall, Sonic Colors learns from the mistakes of Unleashed and keeps everything that made the original good, and that's precisely what I think a sequel should do. For the second worst, Sonic Free Riders. Personally, I've never been a big fan of the Sonic Riders games, as I found it very difficult to get used to the controls and mechanics. But Sonic Free Riders, it's on a whole other level. With the newly released Microsoft Kinect, Sega had the not-so-brilliant idea of having the sequel to Sonic Riders be controlled by means of the player moving their entire body in order to play, using an accessory that wasn't known for its accuracy in detecting movement. On the sequel to a game that people already had a tough time controlling, even with a controller.
Sure, the first Riders was known for its steep learning curve, but man, that game went so hard for a silly spin-off. The intense animation, complex gameplay, an elaborate plot? Wait, hang on. Where did the plot for Free Riders go? Oh, here it is, in these still frames on a TV screen. Okay, so after all of that crazy drama about ancient rogues angering gods that cast their home into the earth and then racing against their ancestors to uncover said home and track down a long-lost treasurer, what did the final Riders game do for their plot? They gave us a bare-bones story about a pathetically disguised Robotnik holding a Grand Prix, falsely promising a cash prize to the team that wins. Of course, it's all a lie. Eggman's actually holding these races to collect data on each of the racers in order to to program his robot racers? Sure, why not? Metal Sonic shows up later, so, that's nice.
Wait, that's it?
Yep, that's about it.
Oh, the story leaves a lot to be desired, really. The presentation of the cutscenes is also quite stilted, with dialogue being delivered through character portraits and a TV static filter. It came off as pretty lazy to me, especially since the first two Sonic Riders games have both CGI and in-game cutscenes. And by Sonic cutscene standards, they look pretty decent. A large issue with the controls is the player has to perform relatively complex movements with the Kinect. And as we mentioned, the Kinect is not known for its accuracy.
Even the menu navigation has this problem. The player has to spin this circular dial to reach the option they want, but to call it unresponsive would be an understatement.
The game even tries to get players to emulate the mannerisms of each character, which unsurprisingly doesn't come too naturally to the human body.
I appreciate some of the ideas here, but like most of the Kinect library, it's again not very responsive. And even when you consider the embarrassing game lineup for this stupid camera, Free Riders is considered one of the worst.
It's worth noting though, the presentation outside the cutscenes is actually quite nice, with the game having pleasant visuals and of course a great soundtrack.
I don't want to talk about this game anymore.
And for the second best, Sonic Mania. Now this is a Sonic game made with love and care. Fun fact, my brother and I were so excited to play this game, we livestream 100%ed it for charity a couple of years ago. This manages to bring me back that childhood excitement and simple joy of a solid, speedy 2D Sonic game. It's as simple as that. Sonic Mania is one of the few, if not only, examples of a game publisher hiring fans to make a game for them. And it worked beautifully.
Well, how about that? A classic Sonic game is considered one of the greatest from this past decade. Anyway, to call these guys fans is underselling them a bit. These guys cut their teeth on fan projects, sure, but Sega brought them in to re-release Sonic 1, 2, and CD. And not only did they port them, they made the definitive versions of these classics. Christian Whitehead and Headcanon display a clear, deep understanding of the fundamentals of what makes a Sonic game good, and how to effectively replicate the feel of the old Genesis games. Yet they also come up with new, inventive level gimmicks, set pieces, and layouts to continually interest a player, and I cannot stress that part enough. While old levels are used and largely emulated through most of the first acts, they use the second acts to throw in crazy new ideas. It feels like these guys had all these neat ideas brewing for years, and were just dying to get them out the door.
You can really appreciate the level of detail in these 2D sprites. They double the original animations for a shining example of how smooth 2D animations can feel, and the characters are just as expressive, if not more expressive than the 2D Genesis games. The level of care also extends to the masterful soundtrack of this game. Good old T-Lopes helped make much of the music, and I've been gratefully using his Sonic remixes in my videos since I started in 2014. Every track is sublime and complements the feel of each stage perfectly.
The game's story is based after the events of the actual best Sonic game, Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Don't at me. It's kind of like that Halloween reboot that just ignores the last 20-ish years of games and gets things back on track. Sonic and Tails head over to Angel Island, which is back in the ocean for some reason, where they come across the hard-boiled heavies as they unearth a mysterious gem that warps our heroes to Green Hill Zone, a level that nobody in the Sonic fanbase is sick of seeing. They warp around here and there, but long and short of it, Sonic has to stop Robotnik from taking control of the little planet again. And more importantly, get this mysterious Phantom Ruby away from his grubby mitts. Sure glad they kept this story nice and simple and in no way tied into an embarrassing boost game.
But this team knew that delivering quality was more important than delivering quantity here. The game doesn't do things radically different or try and reinvent the Sonic gameplay. It's all about getting just right the gameplay fans have liked for 30 years.
What really sets this apart from the likes of Sonic Advance or Sonic 4 is that the nostalgia here feels like a nice extra. It's not actually the main selling point. Sure, that catches your eye and it gets you in the door, but you stick around for some proper, solid gameplay. This not only understands the core mechanics of the classics, but it builds upon them. Even with the likes of Green Hill and Chemical Plant, this is still a follow-up. It's more complex and more challenging, yet more refined when compared to the classics in a lot of aspects. This is a great game for newcomers to firmly understand what Sonic was all about, and it's still a solid new challenge for veterans. With a series so utterly confused about its own identity, Mania is here to remind you, it's been here the whole time.
The decades of modding experience from the fans really show here. They know how Sonic should look, move, sound, and feel. If you just like a solid, tough to put down, classic Sonic experience, well, Sonic Mania is a great choice. And before we get to the number ones, let's go through some quick honorable mentions. Sonic Heroes. Many Sonic fans seem to be split on whether they prefer a serious, more dark story or a light-hearted, happy story, and this game could be considered the origin of that split. I personally preferred the slightly more serious, but still engaging stories of the adventure games, and frankly, I found the bright, whimsical tone of Sonic Heroes to be nothing short of sickly sweet.
Amy, what are you doing here?
Sonic, this time there's no way out of marrying me.
Even when I was 17 years younger, it felt sickly sweet. It was just bleh. Now maybe I'm alone on this, but I thought this story wasn't helped by the game's really subpar voice acting.
What are we gonna do, Sonic?
I know the Sonic voice acting team can do better than this. I don't know why they gave such a lackluster performance for this game. And the controls became unwieldy and slippery for me really quickly. I found it way too easy to careen characters off a platform. I understand that many people do like Sonic Heroes, but personally, even at 14 years old, I could not get the appeal of this game. To some, Sonic Heroes marks the end of the adventure era games, but to me personally, the adventure games end with Sonic 2 Battle. Sadly, they once again went with Sega's good old all or nothing approach, and gave us all Edge with the Shadow the Hedgehog game next. Honestly, with their hyperbolic contrasting tones, I don't know which of these two games I found more annoying to play through. Probably Sonic Heroes, because at least Shadow the Hedgehog could make me laugh. Though I did appreciate the goal of the team-based gameplay. It's a unique gameplay dynamic that certainly aimed to please. I personally just didn't enjoy it at all, but that's just me.
Wait, does this count as a modern game?
Well, no, but I just have really strong feelings on Sonic Heroes and wanted to give my 2 cents on it. And as for the dishonorable mentions, you can probably guess one of the ones coming along. Sonic the Hedgehog 2006. That's right, it's not number 1. Everyone already knows the disaster that Sonic 06 was, and many YouTubers have capitalized on repeatedly raging on it. But I can at least say I've always liked the idea of this game, and I personally really do enjoy the graphical style to this day. Sonic 06 is known as an infamous contender for one of the worst games of all time. In my opinion, it's certainly not the worst, but it's a shining example of what exactly can go wrong when a studio decides to rush a game to meet a holiday deadline, and many aspects of it clearly needed a revision of some kind. The only reason it's not on this list is the sheer amount of videos dedicated to this one game. I really do try my best to give you variety, and putting it on this list just wouldn't be too interesting to me.
Again, I personally don't consider this one of the modern games. Either way, I hate it. Looking forward to playing it again on my channel though.
Sonic Forces. I tried this one recently, and I personally disliked it a lot. I felt the controls were clunky and the story was tone deaf and completely silly. And it's brought down once again by poor voice acting for what was probably originally meant to be really serious scenes.
Sonic is alive!
No way. That's excellent.
Why couldn't we have the IDW Metal Virus story instead of this junk? That is legitimately probably the best Sonic story I've ever read, or listened to Nick talk about. And I'm sorry, I know I'm a biased, older fan, but I personally just can't enjoy a being buddy-buddy with Sonic story. We do have an okay character creation system, but the game was criticized for being very short, so we don't get much time to use this character. Apparently this game was developed over 6 years. 6 years. What went wrong? 6 years, yet it averages only 3 hours to beat.
Now, for my own personal list, I'd probably throw Forces up in the worst over Black Knight. That said, it's more competent than a lot of Sonic fans want to admit, but all the same, this is a confusing mess of a game. It's trying to cater to all the different Sonic fan bases at once, while failing to understand why any of them like this series.
Anyway, on to the number ones. And I think the number one worst modern Sonic game is Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric. Now don't get me wrong, I actually really like the Sonic Boom show.
Capable is my middle name.
I thought your middle name was The.
How they represented Knuckles feels jarring and boring, but aside from that, I know and like the characters really well. Over the years, I've rewatched the series on Netflix a whole lot. But this game is a lot worse than the show ever was. Rise of Lyric stands as a shining example of everything that could go wrong when a game enters developer hell. Everything from the mediocre, uninspired gameplay, the bland story, the underdeveloped characters, and the bleak graphics. Even the music, which the Sonic franchise is so well known for, feels forgettable. It all accumulates into a dull and lifeless experience.
Story-wise, our main heroes, Sonic, Tails, Amy, and Knuckles, scour the world in order to collect Chaos Crystals. No, not emeralds, crystals. They do this to keep them out of the hands of the villain, Lyric. He wants to use them to power an army of war robots. And Eggman decides to help the Snake, then later decides to help Sonic instead because that's just how these two roll nowadays. And I think that about covers it. There's some time travel nonsense, but otherwise it's pretty straightforward and easy enough to follow.
You know, even for a Sonic story, the plot of this one is incredibly bare bones and basic. Despite the Sonic Boom show offering a new world with new characters, the world's buildings in this game are just non-existent. Nothing about the world is explained to the player. It just leaves the experience feeling empty and uninteresting. The overworld itself is just too big and empty for its own good. Where's the characters to identify and interact with, to establish that characters actually live here? Where's, I don't know, Meh Burger? That's a big part of Sonic Boom. Though to be fair, I felt the character writing is some of the better writing of the franchise.
You and I have unfinished business.
I have no idea what you're talking about, but I'm pretty sure it's a bad thing.
Rather than the exhilarating, high-speed platforming that Sonic is known for, we're instead given a generic 3D beat-em-up that feels bland and repetitive. Sonic's movement here makes me feel like I'm playing a click-and-play Sonic fan game from 2001. Though to be fair, that's probably an insult to Sonic fan games. We wouldn't have Sonic Mania and Christian Whitehead without it. Anyway, each character has a few basic attacks and some bare-bones combos. And what you see is what you get for the whole game. Players will encounter the same few enemies over and over and over for the entire game.
Probably the most interesting design choice is that each character has different unique abilities, with Tails being able to use air currents to fly higher, Amy has a triple jump, so on and so forth.
And for all its faults, I do still find the tone much less nauseating than Sonic Heroes, so, you know, at least it has that going for it. The unfortunate cherry on top is the poor optimization. The frame rate is incredibly inconsistent, with the game struggling to even maintain a consistent 30 frames a second. And the frame rate can really chug when you enter one of the high-speed sections. Or, jeebus forbid, play the multiplayer mode. The game also has an issue of stuttering when entering other parts of the overworld. Sadly, Sonic Boom apparently turned out like this because the developers, Big Red Button, had to rush to try and fit their idea onto the Wii U, instead of the PS4 and Xbox One, which is what they originally intended the game to be released on.
Many of the ideas the developers wanted to include in the game had to be scrapped in order to get this thing working on a Wii U, resulting in an abundance of glitches, stutters, and loading issues. And it's a shame, because when Sonic fails this badly, the whole franchise becomes a laughingstock. And more importantly to this game, it really feels like there was a solid experience somewhere in this unfinished mess that just never got the chance to shine.
Sonic Boom: Rise of Lyric valiantly attempts to offer a new Sonic experience, but ironically it offers absolutely nothing that anyone looks for in a Sonic game, and somehow being frustrating to play at the same time. I personally feel it offers the least resemblance to what people look for in a Sonic game, and that's why I personally consider it the worst modern Sonic game.
Not cool, Sonic.
And it was a tough call, but I personally think the number one best modern Sonic game is Sonic Generations. After the abysmal trio of games that made up the Sonic 15th anniversary, Sonic wanted to do right by players by offering an experience that pleased both young and older Sonic fans. Those who grew up with Sonic 2D and those who grew up with Sonic 3D. Something that melded the best of classic Sonic with the best of the taller, green-eyed, modern Sonic we have today. I personally thought Sonic Generation pulls it off in spades. The game presents two different styles of gameplay, both the classic momentum-based gameplay of the original Sonic games and the post-Sonic Unleashed modern games.
They once again keep the story simple but effective. It's Sonic's birthday and everyone holds a surprise party for him, including a cake that conveniently leaves out his age and a chili dog. Well, at least he's easy to shop for. Anyway, things go crazy when a hellish monstrosity bursts onto the scene and kidnaps all of Sonic's friends. Can't have those in a game after all. After that, Sonic finds himself in a white void with an entrance to a familiar territory. Yep, you guessed it, Green Hill Zone. Believe it or not, we were actually excited to see this place again back in 2011. And as Sonic travels through these zones, he restores their color. We also encounter a younger Sonic, also known as Classic Sonic, and the duo team up to foil two Robotniks. Again, the story isn't anything to write home about, and there's certainly some missed opportunity here in terms of fun narrative choices, but considering that this was just an excuse to celebrate the legacy of the Hog, I'm completely fine with it. This is a surprisingly loving tribute.
We get some fun gimmicks as well as we dash through these memorable and creative levels. All the levels borrow themes from previous games, but they have all new graphics, level structures and designs to create an experience that's both familiar yet brand new at the same time. And familiar yet brand new? Personally, I think that's right up the alley of many Sonic fans. There's a lot of really cool nods to the past too. Things like the gun truck, Sonic Heroes car, and Wisps make a return. And their memorable set pieces are added both to the classic and modern Sonic stages. The presentation here really is something special. The game's using the power of the Hedgehog engine to develop some really beautiful scenery. The game takes levels from 1 to 2 decades back and gives them this sleek modern look that breathes a whole new life into them. Unfortunately, while Generations does have so much going for it, there were a couple of small issues that kept it from being perfect, to me anyway. For starters, the story felt a little bit rushed to me. I guess not as important as the gameplay, but the story feels coupled together in like an hour, and some people felt there wasn't enough stages. The game has 18 levels in total, while Sonic Colors, for instance, had 66 levels. The game felt long enough to me personally, but I understand the complaint. However, the game still more than delivers in terms of making a fun, engaging modern Sonic game with tons of high-speed action. I personally consider it the ultimate combination of classic Sonic and modern Sonic.
I'm one of those people that do consider Mania a better game overall, but Josh said it best. This is a modern Sonic list, and Generations is where Boost gameplay is at its peak.
It's an affectionate, painstaking love letter to the entire franchise. After Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic has certainly had his ups and downs and been through a very rocky time. And with modern games like Sonic Forces, I think we still have our disappointments. But for me anyway, that's part of the fun of the franchise and community. I can never predict what curveball Sega's gonna throw at us next. Whether the games end up good or bad, I've personally always been able to say, I wasn't seeing that coming. And all the way, Sonic's given me his smile that says, don't worry about it, I'll get it right next time. And even if they don't, well, we've still got a generation of classic and modern Sonic games. And Sonic continues to be my hero and inspire me to this day. Anyway, thanks for dropping into the show, Nick. I'm a big fan of your channel, The Game Apologist, and it was a privilege to have you here. If you're curious, I've linked Nick's channel in the description.
Greatly appreciated, Strider. It's been awesome working with you. And you're always welcome over on my channel if you ever want to talk about those rubber chickens. Anyway, this has been a lot of fun, and I'll catch you guys another time. Toot toot, Strider Warriors.
Toot toot, my friend. Toot toot indeed. And as always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.